Hello and welcome to the Luv Doc podcast with hosts Waldo Wachewski and Ophelia Brewski.
What if I told you that fixing your grandmother's broken computer might actually be the worst thing you could ever do for her health? Welcome to the deep dive.
I mean, that sounds completely backwards, right?
It really does. But today, we're going to unpack exactly why that is. Because, you know, if you are the person in your family who always gets that dreaded phone call.
Oh, we all know the call.
Yeah, the one where a relative says their iPad is acting weird, or, I don't know, their email just magically vanished. You probably think you're just providing free tech support.
Right, which is exhausting enough on its own.
Totally. But today we are going to look at the really surprising truth about aging and loneliness and what your older relatives are really asking for when they call to tell you their screen is frozen.
And we are pulling from a single, just deeply insightful Luv Doc titled Geriatric IT. And it just captures this very specific, very modern exhaustion, you know,
Wow.
the unexpected burden of becoming your family's default tech support.
Right.
But more than that, it actually reveals the psychological mechanics underneath those phone calls.
Yeah. And if you've ever had to, patiently explain the concept of a double click to a grandparent,
Oh my
or,
God.
if you spent an hour trying to figure out where their missing desktop icons went, this conversation is going to hit very close to home for you.
Absolutely.
So the Luv Docs column starts with a letter from someone who signs off as good with computers. And this person, they really just started out trying to do a good deed.
Like we all do.
Exactly. Their dad passed away, and their 82-year-old mom was left living alone with this computer that the dad had bought, sometime around the turn of the century.
Which in tech years is.
It's ancient. We are talking about a seriously heavy, loud machine.
Yeah, a machine that old is, well, it's essentially a digital petri dish.
A digital petri dish.
Right, because it's just accumulated years and years of unseen debris. The letter writer actually mentions having to step in and clean off all these viruses and bloatware just to make the thing usable for her.
And I kind of want to pause on that word, bloatware, because it sounds relatively harmless.
Yeah.
But the mechanism of it is actually incredibly frustrating for an older user. Bloatware is basically digital plaque.
Oh, that's a perfect way to describe it.
Right. It's all those pre-installed programs, the random toolbars that sneak into your browser when you download something
Yeah,
else.
background updaters that just run constantly.
Exactly. Over the years, they just clog up the system's memory. So the machine slows to an absolute crawl, the fan is always spinning like a jet engine, and the user has no idea why their simple request to, open a web browser is taking 4 minutes.
And they just think the computer's broken.
Yeah. So the writer clears all this out. They do a great job. But in doing so, they walk right into a trap.
A massive trap. Because the mom is thrilled. Right, so what does she do? She brags to her 80-year-old sister.
Of course she does.
The writer's aunt. She essentially advertises to the family that her kid will come fix a computer for free.
The ultimate endorsement.
Right.
Why?
So the aunt, who also lives alone and spends her days online, immediately requests the writer's services. And once the aunt is satisfied, well, she recruits her sister-in-law.
It's just an aggressive cascade.
Very aggressive.
By the time we reach April 2026, the writer realizes they have become the de facto unpaid IT department for the entire elderly wing of their family.
Yeah, and the writer is frustrated. I mean, they explicitly say they aren't even that into computers. They just happen to know more than the average geriatric relative.
Right. They just want their weekends back for biking and beer.
Exactly.
They don't want to seem like this mean, ungrateful nephew, but they are just drowning in requests. To me, it feels exactly like fixing a neighbor's leaky faucet because you happen to own a wrench, and then suddenly being drafted as the permanent, unpaid plumber for the entire subdivision.
That is a great analogy.
You know, like every time a pipe bursts anywhere on the block, your phone rings.
Yeah, but that plumbing analogy, it really highlights the infrastructure aspect of this. But the letter writer is doing far more than just tightening pipes.
What do you mean?
Well, the writer notes that they're spending their weekends actively protecting these relatives from weird AI posts and various online scams.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So they aren't just acting as an IT department, they're actually acting as a digital bodyguard.
A digital bodyguard. I really like that framing because it implies active defense rather than just passive maintenance.
Yes, active defense is totally required because of how this specific generation interacts with media. Yet remember, these relatives are highly dependent on the internet to fill just hours and hours of solitude.
Right.
The screen is basically their primary window to the outside world. But we really have to look at the mechanism of how AI scams and deepfakes target them.
Let's get into that.
So this generation grew up in an era where if something was published in a newspaper or broadcast on a television screen, it had gone through professional gatekeepers.
Right, like editors, producers, publishers, people verified the information.
Exactly. And so they naturally, just by default, apply that same baseline of trust to a Facebook feed or an AI-generated pop-up.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. So it's not a lack of intelligence at all. It's a misapplied framework.
Precisely. They are applying a 1975 media consumption framework to a 2026 algorithmic feed.
Wow.
Yeah. If they see a video of a celebrity endorsing a financial product, their brain completely bypasses the critical thinking step that a younger digital native might have. Because historically, the medium itself did the fact-checking for them.
Walter Cronkite wasn't an AI.
Right, which leaves them incredibly vulnerable today. And the nephew feels exhausted because the threats are constant and the people he's protecting have virtually no situational awareness in that environment.
That digital blindness doesn't just stay on the screen, though.
No, it doesn't.
It actually bleeds directly into how they handle the physical reality of the machines they're using. And the Luv Doc understands this completely.
Yes, the Luv Doc has a great story about this.
It's a highly specific, very funny anecdote about their own dad's tech woes. So about a decade ago, the Luv Doc was visiting their dad, and the dad casually mentioned that he thought there was a, quote, little tiny man inside his computer.
Which is a statement that immediately prompts the doc to evaluate the dad's medical state.
Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the doc mentions knowing the dad occasionally mixed a bit too much whiskey with his medications.
Oh, what?
So there's this baseline worry about his cognitive grip on reality.
The doc actually thought the dad was hallucinating, right? Or experiencing some kind of severe dementia symptom. So the doc asks for clarification, probably terrified of the answer.
Yeah.
But the dad explains, no, I think there is someone literally controlling my computer. And he points to the screen, and sure enough, the mouse pointer is drifting and moving all by itself.
And then the doc's immediate secondary thought is that their late mother's spirit is mischievously haunting the PC from the grave.
Which is such a funny jump to make. But it shows just how confounding hardware issues can be when you don't understand the underlying mechanics.
Oh, completely.
But of course, a quick Google search reveals a purely physical culprit.
A dirty trackball mouse.
Yes. If you remember those older mice with the physical ball inside.
Oh, well, the ones you had to take apart.
Yeah, they rely on tiny optical sensors to read the movement of the ball. And over time, as the user rolls the ball with their fingers, natural skin oils, dust, and lint just get pushed down into the housing.
It's gross.
It really is. And when that debris blocks the sensors, the computer receives fragmented, confused signals, so the pointer starts drifting across the screen without anyone touching it.
The ghost in the machine.
Exactly. So the doc pops the cover off the trackball and pulls out what they describe as a disturbing amount of hair, gunk, schmutz, and whatnot.
And the little man is bandaged.
He's gone.
But what we're really seeing in the Luv Doc story here is a profound parallel between physical neglect and virtual neglect.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The physical neglect is the hair and the schmutz building up inside the hardware over months or years. You can literally see the lack of maintenance.
Right.
But the virtual neglect is what happens on the screen. The doc mentions that every subsequent visit became a routine of decluttering the dad's desktop, like clearing out viruses he accumulated from shady gaming sites just so he could play Wordle.
And both types of neglect stem from the exact same root cause. There's a massive canyon between the sophisticated tools the elderly are using for entertainment and their actual comprehension of the risks involved.
Right.
When the machine behaves unexpectedly, they just don't have the baseline technical literacy to diagnose it, so they default to magical thinking.
A little man.
Or a ghost.
I just think about how dangerous that is. It feels less like they're surfing the web and more like we've dropped them in the middle of Times Square with their wallet hanging open.
Yeah.
But they genuinely think they're just looking out their own living room window.
Are you currently unclothed? Yeesh, that's only cool at certain resorts on the French Riviera, Hippie Hollow, and your backyard. But only if you have one of those slowly rotting wooden privacy fences your creepy neighbor likes to leer over while he's watering his rosebush. Otherwise, if you want to win friends and influence enemies, you need to get outfitted in some sick merch from the Luv Doc shop at thepleasurecraft.com. Are you a hard fit? We got you, boo. Plus, there are a variety of styles and colors that can accommodate any levels of uncoolness, even yours. So make a sensible fashion decision and hightail it to the Luv Doc shop at thepleasurecraft.com. Your body is counting on you.
If you don't understand that a dirty trackball causes a drifting pointer, how are you supposed to understand that a pop-up saying your bank account is frozen is actually a criminal in another country trying to steal your pension?
You can't. You simply don't have the mental firewall to question it.
Yeah.
And this is why the nephew from the first letter is completely justified in feeling stress.
Absolutely.
He recognizes the stakes, even if his relatives don't.
But the stakes really go way beyond financial scams. The Luv Doc story about their dad takes a very dark turn here. We move from the comical reality of dirty trackballs to a literal life or death reality of physical vulnerability.
Yeah, it's very serious.
It turns out the tech problems are often a smokescreen for declining health. One summer, the Luv Doc's dad fell down in the shower. And the cause wasn't a slippery floor. He fell because he overdosed on his blood thinners.
And the mechanics of how that overdose happened are just so mundane. It's something that could happen to literally anyone managing multiple medications, which is what makes it so terrifying.
The doc lays out the formula perfectly. It's the classic plastic day-of-the-week pill container trap.
We've all seen them.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They are supposed to be foolproof. But imagine you're an elderly man living alone. You walk into the kitchen at 2 in the afternoon, and you look at the Tuesday slot.
And it's empty.
It's empty. Now the mental gymnastics begin. Did you take the pill at 8 in the morning and empty the slot? Or did you forget to refill the container on Sunday, meaning you haven't taken your medication at all?
Right. The visual cue is entirely ambiguous, and the memory fails to fill in the gap.
Yeah.
So the dad chooses to assume he missed the dose, and he takes the pill straight from the bottle. And he likely makes this same error multiple times in a short window. The result is catastrophic.
His blood pressure drops dangerously low. The doc actually compares this medical state to Michael Jordan's blood pressure in the last 20 seconds of Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals.
Ice in the veins.
Absolute bottomed-out pressure. But instead of hitting a championship-winning shot, the dad passes out in the shower. And because his blood is so unnaturally thinned out from the overdose, the bruising from the fall is just horrific.
The doc describes a massive wine-stained splotch of a bruise.
Oh, God!
I mean, this is a severe internal injury. It's the kind of trauma that would send anyone with a baseline of self-preservation immediately to the emergency room.
But the dad ignores it. He doesn't call an ambulance. He doesn't even call his kids. And his reasoning is the most devastating part of the whole column.
It really is.
He ignored a massive, potentially fatal injury because he, quote, didn't want to be a bother. And I want you, listening to this, to really hold on to that phrase for a second. Don't want to be a bother. Because if you look at the dad's behavior alongside the relatives of the good with computers, letter writer, we uncover a massive, profound contradiction.
It is the crux of the entire situation. On one hand, you have elderly folks who will gladly monopolize their nephew's weekends.
Right.
They will call him relentlessly for minor IT issues. A lost password, a weird advertisement, a slow browser. They have zero hesitation about being a bother when it comes to the computer.
They will happily take away his biking and beers time.
Exactly. But on the other hand, when faced with a severe life-threatening physical injury, like a massive internal bruise from a fall, they actively hide it.
They suffer in silence.
Why is a broken computer an acceptable reason to demand attention, but a broken body is a secret to be kept?
It's such a powerful question. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a misdirection of needs, and it's driven entirely by fear. Calling the nephew about the computer isn't really about the computer. It's a socially acceptable way to ask for company. It's a safe, transactional way to say, come visit me, without ever having to admit to the vulnerability of loneliness. It gives the interaction a concrete purpose.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But calling about a fall, admitting to a medical emergency, or a failure to manage your medications, that signals a loss of independence.
The moment they admit they fell, they risk losing the house.
Precisely. They know that a serious injury triggers a cascade of interventions from their children. It means discussions about assisted living. So they hide the physical decline out of this absolute terror of losing their autonomy, but they amplify the technological decline out of a desperate craving for human connection.
Wow. So the tech problem is just a Trojan horse for human interaction.
Yes.
The aunt doesn't actually care if the bloatware is gone. She cares that her nephew is sitting in her living room for an hour. And that completely reframes the entire burden of being the family IT person. You aren't fixing machines. You are functioning as a social Band-Aid, basically trying to treat your family's profound isolation with antivirus software.
And treating isolation with software never works, because the software is often what isolates us in the first place.
Right.
which leads directly to the resolution of the Luv Doc story and the ultimate advice they give to the letter writer.
So the doc and their brothers eventually had to intervene with the dad. The hidden bruises and the medication errors just became too severe to ignore.
They had to step in.
They successfully convinced him to move into a managed care facility. And the really beautiful part of the story is that the doc notes the dad absolutely thrived there. He lived to a ripe old age, happier and healthier than he was living alone in his house.
Because his environment finally changed to match his actual human needs.
Yes.
He no longer had to, manufacture a crisis with his trackball just to have someone to talk to.
And this brings us to the Luv Doc's central thesis, which sounds almost too simple, but it carries so much weight. People need to be around other people.
Simple as that.
Computers are currently not, and may never be, an adequate substitute for physical presence. The doc even references Mark Zuckerberg, pointing out that, quote, even Zuck threw in the towel on that deal.
Yeah, we spent billions of dollars over the last few years trying to make the metaverse a substitute for physical proximity. And we learned a really harsh biological lesson.
What's that?
A digital avatar handing you a virtual cup of coffee doesn't release the same oxytocin or provide the same nervous system regulation as sitting across a diner table from a real friend.
It's just not the same.
The physical world cannot be replicated by a screen, especially for a generation that spent the first 60 years of their lives entirely in the physical world.
Right. So knowing all of this, the Luv Doc gives Good with Computers their final verdict. And the advice is emphatically not to just cut the family off.
No, you can't just abandon them.
Right. You don't just stop answering the phone and leave them to drown in AI scams. But you also don't resign yourself to a lifetime of weekend IT support. You have to redirect their focus.
Yes.
You have to empower these relatives to find physical places in the real world where they can be around people, places that can make their lives easier and less lonely.
It solved the social problem, not the tech problem.
But the challenge, practically speaking, is how you actually have that conversation. Because if you are the nephew, you can't just walk into your aunt's house, ignore the broken computer, and announce she needs more friends.
No, that would go terribly.
So you have to use the IT visit as a bridge.
It requires a gentle but firm pivot.
Yeah.
When the aunt calls about a computer virus, you still go over. But you change the focus of the visit. You fix the mouse, and then you sit down and say, I got the computer running, but while I was driving over, I saw there's a great senior walking group that meets on Tuesdays at the park.
Or, I heard about a card club at the community center. Let's go check it out together this week.
Exactly. You leverage the trust you've built as the digital bodyguard to guide them back into the physical world.
That's a great way to put it.
And recognizing that their real problem is a craving for connection is the only way you will ever get your weekends back for biking and beers.
Right, because as long as you are their only source of interaction, they will subconsciously find reasons for their computers to break.
The trackball will always find new schmutz.
It really will. But once their social calendars are full, once they have a lunch date to get to or a book club to prepare for, the slow browser won't seem like an apocalyptic crisis anymore.
You genuinely improve their quality of life by solving the root cause of the phone call.
We started this podcast looking at a funny, frustrating story about an ancient computer, bloatware, and a little man moving a mouse pointer. But we ended up uncovering this incredibly profound realization about how we age.
Yeah, it's quite a journey.
These relentless IT support requests from our older relatives are rarely about the hardware breaking down. They are about their social circles breaking down.
The computer is just the excuse they use to reach out and pull you back into their orbit.
It's a sobering look at how we attempt to use technology to bridge emotional and physical gaps it was just never engineered to fill.
It really is.
Well, thank you so much for coming along on this deep dive with us today. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final challenging question to mull over.
Let's hear it.
Think back to where we started. We talked about how the instinct is to fix the machine, to clear the viruses, to make the screen run perfectly so our relatives can stay connected. But if technology is ultimately failing as a substitute for human companionship, if the glow of the monitor is actually keeping them isolated indoors, what if fixing our older relatives' computers is actually the worst thing we can do? By constantly repairing their digital window to the world, are we just enabling their isolation? Are we making it easier for them to stay alone in their houses, staring at a screen instead of seeking out real people? Maybe the next time their computer breaks, we should just leave it broken.
Thank you for listening to the Luv Doc podcast.
To read the column that spawned this podcast, go to austinchronicle.com/columns/the Luv Doc. There are probably worse things to do with your time, right?